August 28, 1955. Emmett Till is brutally murdered as a result of speaking out of place to a white woman. June 21, 1964. Andrew Goodman, Michael Schwerner, and James Chaney, three civil rights workers, are lynched to warn people of the repercussions of working towards desegregation. December 4, 1969. Illinois chapter Black Panther leader Fred Hampton is fatally shot while lying in bed. June 7, 1998. 30 years later, and yet another tragedy is added to the list. James Byrd is tied to the back of a Ford pickup truck and violently dragged through the rocks and dirt, eventually killing him. White supremacy has deep roots in Jasper, Texas, where a prominent activity base for the Ku Klux Klan once existed. When James Byrd was violently murdered, it was no surprise to see that the murderers were avid white supremacists. Lawrence Russell Brewer, one of the killers, had previously served jail time for burglary and drug use. John William King handwrote a 22-page bylaw for a racist group to be an affiliate of the KKK. Sean Berry had been raised to abhor black people, but there was no evidence of his involvement in white supremacist groups. On a warm evening in June of 1998, three men offered an intoxicated James Byrd a ride home with ill intent. Brewer, King, and Berry were elated when he graciously accepted. It wasn't long before they had lured him out of the car and began to beat him cruelly and viciously. Berry claims that he attempted to intervene, but froze as they turned Byrd into a bloody mess. When Byrd was incapable of moving, Brewer unzipped his fly and proceeded to urinate on him, and laughing maniacally while doing so. They then chained Byrd to their pickup truck and drove for 3 miles, the bumps in the road maiming him. By the end of their joyride, he had lost his head and an arm. His remains were abandoned in front of a black cemetery. The police were quick to discover evidence of the brutal murder and find the 3 prime suspects. With trails of blood streaming along the road where Byrd was dragged, the police searched the area heavily. With sufficient evidence of the involvement of Brewer and King coupled with their passive supremacy, the jury quickly determined that the only fair punishment was the death penalty. Sean Berry, on the other hand, was harder to convict. He claimed that he was present during the murder but did not partake in it. With little evidence of his involvement, Berry was sentenced to life in prison rather than being sentenced to death row like his partners. In this slide, Byrd's parents sit in his trial, his blood is on the ground at the scene of the crime, and the pipe sticks out of the ground which severed his head from his body. Harsh reactions came with the news of the death of James Byrd. The Racial Peace Association ruled the murder stemming from roots of racism, making the story become a social media overhaul. Byrd's family created the James Byrd Foundation for Healing in an attempt to deplete and cure the racism evident in the United States. Furthermore, 2 documentaries were produced regarding Jasper and the murder of James Byrd Jr. In response to the acts of violence and prejudice, the government created the Hate Crimes Prevention Act, which was just recently signed into law by Barack Obama in 2009. This new act expanded the 1969 United States federal hate crime law to include crimes motivated by a victim's actual or perceived gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability, while ultimately stressing the racial equality as well. This crime was driven by pure hatred for the color of a man's skin. If a white man had called a white woman baby in 1955, there would have been no consequences. However, like James Byrd, Emmett Till was condemned for the color of his skin. Fred Hampton was targeted for the color of his skin. 3 civil rights workers were lynched for, yet again, the color of their skin. Although it seems that the civil rights movement had made its impact long before 1998, it is clear that hatred and racism runs deep. Because racism is buried so far in our history, it's difficult to completely expel it from our society. Racism stems from the roots. It is an abstract idea that can only be brought among us by other people. These acquired beliefs drive people to insane measures, as evidenced by the death of James Byrd Jr.